Welcome everyone to another Industry and Transition phone call. I'm thrilled to have Patty Carter from Edward Jones. She's principal at Edward Jones with us today. And the topic we're going to talk about is something that's near and dear to my heart, and I know to all of you as well. And it's culture, industry culture, financial advisor culture. So welcome, Patty. We're really happy to have you here.
Thank you, Tony. Excited to be here.
You're welcome. So Edward Jones and AdvisorHub got together. We're doing this annual culture survey, and it's an AdvisorHub Edward Jones culture survey, and it's the first of its kind in the industry, and obviously a topic that has a lot of meaning to a lot of people. So I'm thrilled to be able to sort of discuss culture and generally with you. And one of the things we found out with the survey was that overall advisors are pretty happy with their culture at their firms, and that was kind of a surprise because the squeaky wheel always gets the grease, so everyone's always complaining. And I think there's an element of advisors kind of, they're sort of, they can be cranky about things, but it's always with an eye towards getting something good done, for their clients, which is a nice thing. So just in general, Edward Jones got involved in this survey with us. What was the motivation?
Well, we believe culture is really important, but we wanted to see if the rest of the industry felt as strongly about culture as we do.
Yeah.
We see culture, investing in our culture, as extremely important to the client experience. Clients can tell if branch teams are happy, and if branch teams are happy, they exude confidence to their clients. So we believe it's extremely important.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. If you walk into a branch, I mean, it was always my feeling. You walk into an unhappy place, it's unhappy. It's in the air, right? And you walk into a happy, productive branch, it feels like a beehive. Everyone's happy and making things happen. And I think when some people, I'm so happy to hear you say that about your firm, because I think when some firms, look at this, they just think, well, they don't even put it in there. They don't even factor it into what they're doing. And you get some consultant from a large consulting firm come over and they never mention culture. They just mention change this number, do this. But it sounds like you guys are actually paying attention to culture in the decisions you make.
So yes, we give it a lot of focus, and we really believe that it enhances the client experience and the associate experience. And we believe that having a really strong and vibrant and meaningful culture contributes to certainly the bottom line, but more importantly, how clients feel and how associates feel.
Well, you and I were talking prior to this, and what I also found terrific was that your dad was in the business, and he was in the business at Edward Jones. So, I mean, in my mind, culturally, that's meaningful right there.
Oh yes, we have a lot of children, nieces, nephews, third, fourth generation at our firm. So I think that's a really great testimony to how we all feel about this place, that we want our loved ones, the people we care most about, to be here too.
What number employee was your dad?
Oh, he was around 320. I was around 2,500 in 1994, and now we're more than 19,000.
Wow, that's great. When you think about that, you think about families working together. That is one of the great things about our business, and the fact that you can pass it on. But you had your dad to mentor you. That's a big deal. Yes. In the firm today. How are you sort of trying to replicate that? Because that's really important for culture. Right? Culture is something that's passed on.
Right. So we have informal and formal mentoring situations where literally, when financial advisors get started in the business, they're matched with somebody that will help them along the way. And then they strike up informal relationships as well. I know that was certainly my case growing up through the firm. I would also say our region structure really fosters and encourages that. We have 306 regions across the company in both the US and Canada. And the 19,000 financial advisors are organized into those 306 regions. The purpose of the regions is really to understand those branch teams and where they are in their business and work with them to continue to build and grow their business.
That's interesting because a lot of firms are going the opposite direction, right? They're trying to get rid of regions. They're trying to get rid of help, to advisors, and they're making these branches into complexes where now there's like, 500 advisors in a complex, making it very difficult to sort of get any contact with anybody who's, those folks who used to run the branches, they used to be the keepers of the culture, right? So you had 50 people in a branch or 30 people, and you could have a branch that had its own unique culture. But once you start complexing it, how culture doesn't diffuse down like that. That's why I find that 306 regions is very interesting.
And there's 50 to 75 branches in those 306 regions. And it really makes for a collaborative versus a competitive environment. And I know I am a perfect example of someone who experienced that supportive and encouraging culture all throughout my career as a financial advisor, and even in the home office, I would say too.
Yeah, and that's important, right? In terms of trying to build a book, and especially now with COVID, it's been so hard for people to get the. I mean, my heart goes out to young people because I have two daughters that are both, they both work. I'm in Virginia, they work in DC. My two oldest, and they maybe worked for a year or a few months because they're mid-20s, and all of a sudden they're working from home. They're missing that whole office interaction, all that environment, and it's so important. Yeah, that's how you learn how to do business.
Well, I would say our branch teams are predominantly in branch. What we did do was prevent clients from coming into the branch to protect our teams, and then pivoted to a virtual environment like you and I are doing right this minute. And just think 10 months ago, people weren't very fluent in Zoom. And now our branch teams are extremely fluent in Zoom and are able to really continue to serve clients in a one-to-one way, but in a virtual way.
So how do you maintain culture in a Zoom environment? I mean, because that's one of the things, obviously, I'm sure, just having talked to you before, talking to you, I mean, you're somebody who probably likes that personal interaction. You like to go, I'm sure you like to go around and meet everybody and shake hands. How do you keep it going? How do you keep a unique culture going in a Zoom environment?
So I would really say that goes back to that region structure as far as the branch teams are concerned, because they've continued to have regional meetings. We just completed all of our fall regional meetings, and all of the home office partners were really involved and invested in attending those fall regional meetings and then the follow through from those fall regional meetings. And the regions individually will do events and learning and continuing education types of things to keep connected, because yes, the region fosters a really nice family oriented philosophy and culture. And so the regions have really stepped up to help continue that going forward in this virtual world until we can get back to face to face.
So Edward Jones has a unique, it's a unique model, right? It's a unique setup. It's not, I mean, I know you have branch offices and but you have a lot of individual offices. It's different than the standard, firm. So what came first? It's a chicken and the egg kind of question. Did the culture drive sort of the setup, or does the setup drive culture?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I've been thinking about that a little
That's
bit.
why I'm so good at what I do, Patty.
So I really believe it is definitely the chicken in your example, because I think it really starts with going all the way back to our founders. Mr. Jones Sr. Left the firm that he was working with almost 100 years ago because he didn't feel like he was treated fairly. And so he wanted to start a company that really treated their associates fairly. And then his son picked it up from there, Ted Jones, and he turned our company into a partnership. And so now more than 50%, more than 25,000 people are limited partner owners of the firm. And I really do believe that owners think differently than employees. And so I think it was that foundation that built our culture, but then it is all of us nurturing and caring for our culture that keeps it going and keeps it strong. And I would really say very future focused at this point.
It's interesting because there's a lot of focus in the industry on the independent movement, which is sort of the largest, growing sector. But during the time that the independent movement became, popular, Edward Jones grew to be the largest firm. And it embraces a lot of the same ethos. This idea of partnership and ownership is I think, one of the key drivers to pushing people to RIAs. And the culture survey sort of found this out too, that there was sort of more happiness in the independent world. And when you looked at the sort of the wirehouse world, it didn't look as happy, or there was a lot more negativity about different factors. And certainly this ownership and it gives you that sense of family, you know what I mean? That's hard to replace, but that seems to be the future. It's sort of an old idea that's now come back. This idea of it's like a back to the future thing.
Right. I think of it as autonomy with support. So we have a very autonomous individual branch team environment, but with the support of a Fortune 500 company to be able to serve clients exceptionally well.
Yeah, it's important. And, there seems to be a little bit of sort of this multiplier effect, right? And you and I talked a little bit about that the other day, that the mentoring, how that creates opportunity. And I think when in terms of culture, people want to see that the ownership makes them feel, important, but they want to see that they have a say, or there's a voice in it, or this, feels like me. And I think that whole idea of this multiplier effect, that the mentoring creating this opportunity, that lets people actually see that there's things change.
And I would even go so far to call it belonging, that people are part of something, Edward Jones, but their real point of view and where they interact is in the region. And so the region really gives people that sense of belonging and part of something with support. They gain something from it, but it's also camaraderie and fun. So I really think it's connected to belonging.
Um, I think the firms that don't embrace culture are having problems right now. And so, how would you say? I mean, obviously, you mentioned leadership, but how else do you think that Edward Jones sort of fosters its culture within its own community? What are some of the key things that you think your firm does, and that maybe a good firm ought to follow?
Well, I definitely think that culture starts at the top, and Penny Pennington, our managing partner, is a wonderful example of fostering culture and making leadership really at the forefront of our organization. And before her, Jim Weddle, and before her, John Bachman. So this is a continuation of decades, literally, of holding culture up, but without leadership, culture can't stand. And so we have our annual partners meeting actually next week, and we'll spend 3 days together really learning and talking about our future. And leadership is so prominent in how that meeting will be, with empathy, with motivation, with optimism. So those are some of the words that come to my mind when I think about leadership here at the firm and how important it is.
Well, I used to say, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? We came from, my background had, Legg Mason in it, which was, people say they loved each other all the time, and it wasn't a joke. They really did. They loved the firm. They loved the people that, worked there, and it made a difference. It was hard to get a broker to leave Legg Mason, even though there was a lot of money on the table and everything else. They were happy. They were happy.
Right. I'm a huge Elvis Costello fan too, so I like peace, love, and
That's good.
and I really do love that. I feel that way about the firm. I feel like this place is way more than a business relationship, and I think about the relationships that I have with my peers and coworkers, and then thinking back to how meaningful the relationships were with our clients, and really keeping that relationship and the sanctity and the importance of that relationship at the forefront. So absolutely.
When I used to recruit all the time, to build branches of various wirehouse firms, and then my own, RIAs, I'd run into all the time, run into a large advisor at a big firm who would say, I like my manager because he leaves me alone. They don't talk to me, or they just let me do what I want. And the implication was they wanted me to leave them alone, right? They came over, and that's not culture. It's leaving somebody alone is not is not culture, right? You have to sort of engage people in order to be a good manager, in my opinion. And I think that that was always like shooting fish in a barrel when I'd have somebody say that, because we're not going to be left alone. We're going to engage you. And it sounds like through this regional effort, your advisors are engaged. They're engaged with the firm.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely engage with the firm, and this is just not new. I started with the firm 28 years ago, and literally the region is what supported me all along my career and does so, continuing to do that now. And in fact, we've given it a lot more formality than it was when I was coming through. And so it's a really wonderful part of our culture, and I would say the success of our branch teams.
Do you have contact with sort of the new teams that come, of people who are coming from other firms to visit Edward Jones, and what do you see as the differences between where they're coming from and where they're going to end up?
I have not had a lot of contact in the last year or so, but I came from a talent acquisition in my last role. And so, yes, I did have some interaction with financial advisors who had decided to make the change to Edward Jones, and some financial advisors who had left us and had come back.
Boomerang.
And culture was one of the biggest things I heard from them as to why they came here. And also, I would say support, making sure that we had the appropriate technology to help serve clients. We had the appropriate platforms for them to serve clients. And so I would say those two things were definitely what I heard most often.
It's part of that trickle down thing, because I think you get support and service at a good firm, and a firm that feels that if a firm's culturally oriented, that means even the people that answer the phones and the people that do the service jobs, they're also sort of gung-ho and happy to be there, versus waiting forever on hold and just not having anybody to help you, not being able to get an answer.
Right.
Which is what you get sometimes at a big bank.
Right. Right. No, I definitely think the support piece of it, and making sure that it's timely, making sure that it's accurate. I know that's what we spend a lot of our time in the home office working on, so that our branch teams have what they need when they need it.
So, for instance, and you could tell Penny this was my suggestion. Our CEO at Legg Mason used to give the people who answer the phone, flowers or chocolates, with a note from him on their birthdays. It was always felt like they felt a real, but it was smart because they felt a real, I mean, they're answering the phone, but they feel a real connection to leadership in the branch. And that was just a really nice way to sort of connect with people.
I think that I am really good friends with the lady that leads service, and I know that she just holds all those people in such high regard, and they see the connection to the work that they're doing.
Important.
Really, that client, just really focused on the client. And I think all of our efforts in the branch teams and the home office is on that one focus of serving clients.
So what's interesting is I met many people from Edward Jones, and working on, we've been partners in business, obviously, on some things, and it's been fun. But I like everybody I meet there, and I'm not saying this just because you're on them, but I do. And it's interesting because I've started to multi-billion-dollar firms on my own, and I'll say this the nice way, because I would use another word, I'm not going to do that with you, but I say if you hire someone who's a jerk, his or her clients are jerks. You know what I mean? And a firm that doesn't have a strong culture ends up with an amalgam of people, and some of them aren't, nice, and you have a firm that has a culture that's sort of difficult, versus kind of everybody I'm meeting at Edward Jones. And I'm sure there are jerks there somewhere, but they all seem really nice, and they've got sort of the same attitude. And that's one of the most important things about culture. Either you buy into it or you don't, or you're not going to be happy here if you don't buy into it. That's any firm, right?
Right. And I think when people get into the region environment and see and experience it, they really understand that we are really living our culture through that region environment. Explaining culture to somebody who hasn't experienced it, actually, I have found is a little tough. It's like the wind. You can't really see it, but you can feel it when it's there. And so I think that's why people come and stay here as long as they do, is when they get there, get here, they really see how different our culture is.
You're bringing up something that's very interesting to me, because there are a group of people, and the survey showed they don't care about culture. One of the things that was great about the survey is we also gave culture a definition. So we defined it forever. So we don't have to redefine it. Like 98% of the people agreed with our definition of culture, because it is nebulous, right? It's a little hard to figure out, what it is. But that's the key. You either get it or you don't. It's either important to you or it's not. And if you come from a place where there is no culture, or the culture is really negative, it's one of those things that's almost bad. You don't want to have that pushed on you. They're pushing me to buy bank products. They're pushing me to do this. That's considered culture, and it's not. But people who come from a good culture, it's one of the most important things to them.
I think ours is a really pay it forward mentality, and people helped me along in my career. And so I want to help people become more successful. But if that doesn't appeal to you, you probably wouldn't love it here at Edward Jones, right?
Right. And I think that's so critical to recruiting, and so critical to having a culture, is to know who not to hire. That's a big part of it. We're going to bring you on, and you're just not going to be happy here because we do things this way, and you're just not going to be happy. I'm sure there's a cultural fit for you somewhere, but it's not going to be here. I mean, that, in my mind, that's 60% of recruiting, is who not to hire.
Well, and I think candidates experience that along the recruiting process and can kick the tires and discern that for themselves as well. So yes, I think it's probably both parties looking at the situation.
Yeah. And again, the firm, in my mind, the firm with the strongest culture, typically wins out there. So I want to sort of just talk in general about the industry and sort of where culture fits. I think, we sort of established here that we're working together on this survey, and clearly culture is important, at Edward Jones. And thinking about the industry, as a whole, and obviously we had these survey with all the different results, but where do you think, or do you feel like you're too biased because you love your culture so much that culture is super important, or do you think it's becoming more important to the industry based on the trends that we're seeing? Because in my mind, one of the reasons I think people are going to independence is because they're searching for a cultural fit. They're unhappy. Part of their unhappy, even if they don't define it as culture, part of their unhappiness is because the firm, doesn't care.
I think that, again, to your point, I'm very biased. I've been here for almost 30 years. This is all I know for most of my career. And I see people coming here because they want to have a great opportunity, and ours is a fantastic opportunity. You can really build a wonderful business here and become an owner of the firm and really have the full Edward Jones opportunity. But without that culture, without that feeling of belonging, then I would think people would want to consider something different. But what we see is people come, they experience the culture, they become really part of the culture. My next door neighbor was at another firm, and I talked to him for 9 years about coming to Edward Jones. He finally came to Edward Jones. And he said, if I had known this culture was here and this is what it was going to be like, I would have come years ago. So
that you just hear that so often, and it's just so hard. Like we said, it's like the wind. It's so hard to explain to firms that don't have a good culture that's something. And by the way, when I was recruiting to the firms that I had started, it was all about culture. Like, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're like. And if people didn't respond, they probably weren't right, for coming over. So, well, what I want to do is anything else that I didn't hit on that you wanted to talk about, Patty, so we didn't get to today.
Well, just one thing, I really think spirit of caring is another important part of our culture. And I mentioned the pay it forward part of our spirit of caring, but a couple examples of spirit of caring internally, we have something called the Disaster Relief Fund. And the Disaster Relief Fund is set up all the time. And when something happens in the country, in either Canada or the US, a national disaster, associates contribute to that fund, and there's a committee that entertains who might need help in those areas and gets that money out to them. So I think that's a really unique part of our culture. Then the other thing I would love to mention just about the regions is we are the national sponsor for the walks to end Alzheimer's. And over the last 5 years, we've raised $25 million, and we're committed to another $25 million for Alzheimer's for the next 5 years. And over the last 2 years, we've had 600 walks that
Wow.
associates have been involved in. Each year, 600 each year. Associates and some of our clients get involved in those walks as well. And this is a thing that impacts so many of our clients' lives. And so we really see channeling not only the good energy we have here at Edward Jones, but also making sure that we give back to our communities. And Alzheimer's is one way, but many financial advisors and branch teams throughout the US and Canada also give their time so generously to other charities and causes. So I think it's something we want to share. We don't want to just keep it here in our firm.
Yeah. Well, I think, caring is the key thing, right? And you can't fake it. You can't fake, we care about you, we care about your business. And in my mind, caring seeps through everything. So when you see, people, supporting causes and then of course the advisors do their own thing. Because, the good news about being a financial advisor, when you're successful, you have an opportunity to share with your community. And it all comes from culture in my mind. So I'm a huge advocate. I really appreciate your participation in this call and Edward Jones' support of the survey. So thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks so much for having me. Have a great rest of your year.
You too. Happy New Year.